be at the front of the line defending separation of church and state and the right for you to make this decision. But I don't see the role of a member of Congress to stand on the House floor when you can't balance a checkbook and make these decisions for us. And so I think both parties are guilty of this. They send out obnoxious emails to rile up their base and get some donations in, and to get people to the polls by making false and misleading claims on these issues. And they offer no substantive solutions on the things that we worry about the most. How do we get back the American dream in this country? I visited the college campuses in this district in the fall. It's one of the first groups that I reached out to in this campaign. And Republicans said, oh, college kids, they're all liberal. You're not going to be able to convince them to do anything. Give up. Don't even go to the college campuses. And I said, no, I'm going to go to communities where it may be hard to make the case. Hey, I'm a gay Republican. For God's sakes, I'm used to going to communities where it's hard to make the case. And I'm willing to stand there and stand on principles and see if we can find common ground. Because if you don't show up, you'll never start developing relationships and goodwill and start developing ideas that maybe you can work together on. So I showed up at the college campuses, and remember the college kids came in, and a lot of them were Democrats. But let me tell you also, most of them don't like either party. They're where this new generation's going. They think both sides are wrong. They're onto something. They're smart. So I walked in and I said, it's fall of 2013. You know that 20 years ago I was sitting right there in that chair? I was one of you. I had arrived at Georgetown in August of 1993, 20 years ago. I was orphaned. My mom passed away, my dad left 2 weeks beforehand. The Jesuits took me in and gave me high school, a room and board, and a good education. I was fortunate enough to earn a scholarship to Georgetown. That scholarship wasn't going to give me 4 years. So I showed up with $36 cash in my pocket, 2 boxes and a suitcase. And while I was watching my soon-to-be classmates move in with mom and dad and brother and sister in SUVs with stereos and TV sets, and they were talking about where they were going to go to dinner in Georgetown, and way different world. I was consumed with 2 concerns. One, I needed to get to the dean's office immediately because I didn't have enough scholarship to do 4 years. I had to take extra credit to get done in 2.5 to 3 years. And number 2, I had no money for health insurance. I had no health care, no money for room and board, no money for books, no money for food. And so I needed to get a full-time job. So I went to the work-study office. I got 2 part-time jobs, and then I dovetailed that into a full-time job. I did graduate in 3 years. And then I decided, instead of working for someone else, I'd start my first company, as was mentioned in the bio. So I went to a government agency that I heard was giving out loans and grants to small business startups, called the Small Business Administration. I don't know if any of you know about SBA. So I walk in and I say, I understand that you guys got loans and grants, free money for entrepreneurs like myself. I have this idea that we can teach government how to be more efficient and effective and produce better results. Okay, after they stopped laughing, they said, now, we're not going to give you a loan or a grant. You don't have any experience, no professional experience. Go work for someone for 5, 6, 7 years, then come back with a business plan. I wasn't going to be deterred, so I went to a private bank, big bank. I walked in and they said, no money for you. We only give lines of credit and loans to people who have assets. You don't have a house, you don't have stock, so no line of credit for you. So I did what any, logical college kid would do. I took out 2 applications for credit cards and I maxed them both out to start my company. And it was successful. My first seminar sold off the shelf, put all the money back into the company, and over the 9 years that the company ran, and then I sold it, it still runs today. 9 years that I owned the company, we never once had a dime of loans or lines of credit or debt. Because of my experience was, we were able to make it on a cash basis, and the entire company grew. 2 multi-million-dollar companies on a cash basis. Then I got involved with politics and wanting to give back, helped turn around the city of San Diego from the brink of bankruptcy, lost a mayor's race because of the corrosive effect of party politics, partisan labels. And I've decided that I want to change that nationally. And that's why I'm here today. Well, these college kids, by this point, after telling this story, were like, I said, the reason why I'm here today is not to brag or give you an impressive story. It's to deliver some really bad news. 20 years ago, I was able to do all this. If I were to start out today, 20 years later, in 2013, I'd fail. I wouldn't be able to do it. You imagine me trying to get a full-time job in this economy while going to school? Not going to happen. Maybe at Starbucks I'd get a part-time job. But it ain't going to happen in this economy. I wouldn't be able to create a company the way I did. I wouldn't be able to grow it and make it successful the way I did. And so I believe the American dream that allowed me to overcome some pretty big obstacles in my life. And I am grateful to God. I'm grateful to so many people in my life who helped me along the way that I was able to make it. I wouldn't be able to do the same today. You wouldn't be able to do the same. And that's why I believe that we need to make a change. And if you're a Democrat or a Republican, whatever label you decide to put on you, you ought to be mad as heck that the politicians in Washington have mortgaged and taken your future away. The American dream should be yours. We should be giving a country where it is easier to be successful than it was for us. It should be easier for our children and our grandchildren to make the American dream happen. We all know that that's not happening. And we all ought to be outraged. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I'm calling on you tonight, if you're a Democrat, to be as outraged as I am with the Republican Party for playing these games and mortgaging our future and leaving us with a far less opportunity society than we've ever had. So with that, I'll entertain any questions, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or Independent. Fire away. Yes, sir.
I just heard Jeff Flake on the radio the other day from Snowflake, Arizona, where the Flake family, I guess, was the founding family of the town, and then the Snows came along after. And I think he was an ineffectual congressman because he sounded not like you, but he wanted ending all pork barrel, all pork stuff. And they put him on the least committees and such. Now he's a senator. He ran for John Kyle's seat and he won. Now he's one of 50 instead of one of 435. He will make a difference as a senator versus as a congressman. How will you confront that?
That's a great question. When I ran for city council, I knocked on 15,873 doors. We know because we scanned in every single door I went to.
Carl, repeat the question.
The question is, how can one person make a difference?
In the Congress.
In the Congress.
One of 435.
Two questions I always got at the door, running for council. Number one, we love you as the watchdog. Thank you for helping uncover the fiscal crisis of the city. But how do we know that you're not going to go down there and become one of them? I'll leave it to you all to decide whether I became one of them, because I've ruffled the feathers of both the big business establishment of San Diego and the big labor unions establishment. And proudly so, to make the changes that we needed. Gave up my pension on day one. Led the charge to strip city politicians of their pensions. Put them in a 401k and Social Security like the rest of us. So I think when it comes to drinking the Kool-Aid, I've resisted that temptation to acclimate to that political culture. And a lot of the reforms that I have laid out in my Fixed Congress First plan are all about changing that culture, not being part of it. Second, the second question was, how can one person really make a difference?
In 435.
And they were saying, you're going to be one of 8 members of the council, and then of course you have that crazy city attorney, Mike Aguirre, to deal with, because he was in office at the time. And I said, look, it's amazing what you can do if you go out and lay out solid solutions and not worry about political consequence. And so I think right now we've gotten a tremendous amount of national attention for this race. I've got a high profile nationally. Frankly, some of the reporters are intrigued by this zoo creature that they consider the gay Republican. Oh, you're the gay Republican. Let's go get your opinion on something. I'm like, look, in San Diego, I'm not known as the gay Republican. I'm known as the reformer. There may be some other adjectives that you might want to apply, and that's fine. But that's one element of who I am in San Diego. I'm more known as a reformer. And I think that by getting this national attention on some issues, I can then lay out a national set of ideas of solving problems, of getting past party label, of measuring people not in rhetoric but results. So I do believe I can make a difference.
When you have a situation like that, I just heard today.
One question first.
I just want to. When you have a situation today where Eric Cantor got a bill passed while Boehner was out of town on Medicare, on the Affordable Care Act that benefited Obama. How do you confront something like that when you're just a freshman congressman?
Again, people said if I tried taking on pension reform, I wouldn't be able to get it done. We did. We got it done. I do not accept the excuse that one person cannot make a difference. I will never accept that excuse. I have better things to do with my time. Your issues are more important than having a congressman who goes back there, like my opponent, frankly, to be a potted plant. You know, you don't go back there to buy time or get a title. If you're in this business to go to the cocktail parties and to have a title, you need to get out of public service because you should be driven by getting something done. And that's, I think, fundamentally the difference between me and a lot of the other folks in the political class. Yes, right? Back there in the hat, and then I'll go to the person in the t-shirt. Promise.
I'm thinking is a way.
Alan, right?
Stan,
okay.
it's a way to make the government more efficient. Have you ever thought of abolishing civil service and turning it over to a private company?
Well, I don't think that you could do a black and white reform like that, but am I in favor of opening up government services and functions to competitive bidding? Absolutely. In San Diego, voters overwhelmingly agreed that we should be taking the Yellow Pages test and applying it to San Diego city government. And that is, if you can find something that the city government's doing, and I apply this to the federal government, if you're finding something the federal government is doing in the Yellow Pages, you should perhaps want to put that out to bid and just see what sort of efficiency you can get. Now, most of the time, our government workers will win the bids, and I think that's great. Because they know the service better than anyone else, they're currently providing it, and a lot of our federal employees know where the fat is. They know where they can save money and improve performance. And so by creating a competition, you give those employees empowerment to lay out ideas to improve. But if you don't compete, why change? Well, you know, we're not going to lose anything. Might as well just do it the same way over and over again. And we've seen competition save taxpayers tremendous amount of money. They say on average about 15 to 25%, depending upon the nature of the function. So I think we should open up discreetly in a very common sense and thoughtful way, function by function of the government that's appropriate, that we may want to look at competing out. Doesn't mean that you're privatizing, doesn't mean that you're outsourcing, it just means that you're having both sides submit bids to see how you can learn. Yes, sir, in the t-shirt.
Moving in the practical world, what is your position on the Affordable Care Act and minimum wage?
Affordable Care Act. The healthcare system was broken before Obamacare. Now Obamacare makes it a lot worse, but let's recognize that the healthcare system was broken beforehand. And so I slap the Republican Party because they don't have an alternative. You can't beat something with nothing. And so what I want to do is look at the reforms that we can get people to agree on. 80% of the American people, 70%, 60%. If you get an idea that has that much support across party lines, why not put that on the House floor as a single subject bill and see if you can pass it? Now let me talk about some of these issues. One, lawsuit abuse. Do you know that when the topic of lawsuit abuse came up during the Affordable Care Act, that both political parties said, no, we're going to take care of the trial lawyers. We have too many doctors in this country practicing what I call defensive medicine rather than preventative medicine. Perfect example, I went into the doctor a couple months after the mayor's race. My elbow hurt. And each week it was hurting more and more and more and worse and worse. And I kept nursing it and it kept getting worse. So I walk into the doctor about February. He says, what's wrong? I said, I can't even lift the cell phone off the nightstand in the morning. My elbow hurts so much. He said, oh, I know what you got. You got politician arm. I said, well, what's politician arm? He said, well, you probably in the mayor's race did 10, 12 events a day, shook hands with 30 or 40 people. You guys saw how I went to every table and shook hands. You developed this muscle. When you stopped doing that, your muscle contracted. You're now having pain. I said, oh, okay, so how do I fix this? He said, well, run for Congress. And I said, no, how do I fix it? So he put a $5 brace on my arm, type that you'd get at CVS, and he gave me a roll of quarters, and he said, these are the exercises I want you to do. And he said, you'll be fine in 5 or 6 weeks. I said, well, thank you, doctor. He said, now, I'm going to order up an x-ray of your elbow. on the off chance that you have a tumor in your arm. I said, well, do you think I have a tumor or do I have politician's arm? He said, no, you have politician's arm. But I have to order up an x-ray because if I don't, and you do have something more serious, I will get sued. And I have a liability insurance policy that I get audited for, and they will examine a couple of my cases, and if by chance they examine yours and I don't order up an x-ray, I'm in trouble. I said, well, can I decline because I'm on a health savings account? I get preferred pricing, but every treatment I select, ultimately, I pay out of pocket. I get a preferred rate, but I pay out of pocket until I get a certain deductible amount. I said, no, you don't need the x-ray, you're doing the right thing. But don't tell my partners, because we all have a deal with the radiologists where we kind of kick business there and we're part of a medical group. I'm supposed to generate a certain amount of coverage. That replicates two problems that we have in this country: trial lawyers and frivolous lawsuits. And I think that we need to have a common sense tort reform bill applied in healthcare so that we have doctors who are thinking about the appropriate course of action, not what does a lawyer or an insurance company lawyer dictate I have to do, which comes out of your pocket. And second, we have to have a system that infuses choices not with some government bureaucrat or some health insurance bureaucrat, but puts the decision between the doctor and the patient. The fact that I'm in a health savings account works for me. It may not work for everybody. But what we need to do is create a system where people, when they save money in healthcare, that they see some sort of return on themselves. You see this all in your car insurance. You save money by having less of a risk profile. You get some sort of dividend. Your health insurance is less. We see this happening in other forms of insurance. We need to think about this. What about competition? The big insurance companies in Obamacare are guaranteed profits. Did you know that? The politicians said, hey, we're going to write into the bill that we're going to guarantee you profits. We're going to hold you harmless. I consider that a bailout. I'm sorry. Why would the insurance companies care anything about implementation if they knew that no matter how this thing came about, no matter what happens, they're still going to be given a profit? Nobody should be guaranteed a profit by government. And so the insurance companies insisted on one thing during this whole debate, that you not allow people to buy insurance across state lines. Now, why can you buy life insurance across state lines and car insurance across state lines, but not health insurance? Well, have you ever heard of Blue Cross Blue Shield of California, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts? Each of these big insurance companies have a monopoly. There's only a couple competitors in each state. They specialize. They do not want competition from other insurance companies for the pool, the risk pool of applicants in their state. We need to open up that market to more competition. We also need to open up the healthcare buying ability to cooperative purchasing. When I was a small business, I started out by covering 100% of my employees' health insurance. 100%. They didn't pay a dime. Because I felt very strongly about providing my employees with health care. Over the years, our premiums went up, but I also noticed that on a per employee basis, we were getting discounts. Why? They were getting bigger. We started out with 15 employees, grew pretty big to 180 employees. We got discounts. Well, can you imagine what my rate would be if I were able to cooperatively purchase with other small businesses of my size across state lines, and maybe we were a risk pool of 2,000 or 5,000? We would see cost savings for our employees, and I would be able to provide them with more options and more coverage. Nothing in Obamacare does anything about containing the cost of healthcare. We have a cost crisis in healthcare, and it's driven mainly by lack of competition and by government mandates. Obamacare's theory is if you force everybody by individual mandate to pay into the system, that there'll be more money to move around to cover everybody. I'm sorry, where that comes down to is throw good money after bad. I don't believe that the healthcare system is as efficient and as accountable as we need it to be. And I'd like us to have conversations about that set of reforms, where if you lay these out, tort reform, buy across state lines, cooperative purchasing, equal treatment under the tax code for healthcare premiums, whether you're self-employed, small business, or big business. Do you know that 65 to 75% of the American people agree with these ideas? But none of these are in Obamacare. So put those on the table and let's get a vote. Let's see if we can make healthcare better by implementing these reforms. So I think that this black and white debate doesn't help us. Minimum wage, my hope is that we can increase wages across the board. I'm very concerned about how do we pay for take-home pay increases. And I think the best way to do that is to change the dynamics in this economy so that struggling businesses can invest and expand the job base so that there's more money for take-home pay for the American worker. Yes, ma'am?
Recently, some states have passed restrictive abortion laws, for example, Texas. What's your position on using this model at the federal level?
I think it's absurd. I think people should be able to make those decisions. The question is about restrictive legislation as it relates to reproductive health in this country. And I just don't think that's the role of government to make that decision. Yes?
I'd like to go back to your comments about healthcare. You very carefully, I think, skipped over something that was quite essential in your story, which is the role of doctors in for-profit businesses. Now, what about that?
Well, you didn't ask about that, so I'm happy to ask. I don't know. I don't know enough about the issues that you're addressing. What's the concern that you have there?
were just talking about rising healthcare costs
Right.
and blaming Obamacare, but you had also.
I was not blaming just Obamacare. The healthcare system was broken before Obamacare. Let's start with that.
Okay.
We have a broken healthcare
One of
system
the
that needs
reasons-
reform.
One of the reasons why healthcare costs in the United States are rising to the degree that they were, although they have significantly slowed recently, is that doctors had investments in testing, x-rays, and the like. So that medicine was not being practiced for the patient. Medicine was being practiced as a for-profit business. Now, what is
What's that? We have a doctor up here. What's your
Stark
experience on this?
legislation started in the 90s. That stuff's been outlawed for a long
Yeah,
time.
that's old news.
All right.
That's old.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
It's been outlawed for decades. 1990s?
That's when it started,
That's when it started. They started outlawing that.
They're called the Stark law.
What other additional problems do you have there that you want me to know about?
I'll let other people have questions.
Okay. I'm glad that we were able to get that information on the table. Yes?
What are your views of immigration reform?
I think that the reason why we're not seeing immigration reform is that you have 15% extremes on both sides of these political parties who do not want immigration reform to happen. And they're stretching the debate and making the conversation so that we are missing out on the fundamental areas where we agree. First and foremost, let's change the tone and tenor on this conversation. The way in which both sides communicate on these issues is so disrespecting. And it does not yield unity, it's designed to divide us. Both sides, by the way. It's unacceptable, and I hope that Democrats here will say, stop playing the boogeyman on this, and we ought to tell Republicans, hey, stop disrespecting people who are not like you. You know, we are a nation of immigrants. San Diego, I think, has it right. When you look at how we interact in San Diego, we have immense diversity in this city. We have also immense tranquility and respect and appreciation for our differences. You don't see that in other cities with as much diversity as we have. And so I think San Diego, the way we deal with this is, hey, we're all one community. We're stronger because of our diversity. And we go to each other's festivals. We see integrated neighborhoods and communities. This is all a good thing. And I think this really is where the country is going, is the San Diego tone and tenor. I don't think that the congressional delegation reflects the San Diego tone and tenor on this issue in Washington. I intend to do that. Second, we have a broken immigration system. That's why you have illegal immigration. Most, quote, illegal immigrants come here legally. They come here on a work permit. They come here as a student to study. And what happens? They fall in love with this great country. They fall in love with the job that they have. They want to be citizens, many of them. And they are trying to earn their citizenship, but we have a broken system that doesn't allow that for too many of them. And so I think that we have to figure out how do we fix the immigration process so that you can deal with the illegal immigration issue. It's a symptom that we seem to be focusing on rather than the problem. Yes, we need to focus on border security. If we can secure the border, you'll deal with a certain segment of the problem. But you also have to fix the broken system as it relates to work visas, student visas, citizenship applications.
Do you
And
believe,
finally, you don't need to have citizenship as the only option. Citizenship may be one route that people are seeking, but why not allow a system where people can get a permit to work in this country or a permit to study? That should not be off the table. And I think a lot of the American people are afraid because they think everything is about citizenship. Well, frankly, when you take a look at the nature of our immigration system and the nature of what these immigrants would like to have, not all of it is citizenship. So if we can look at these issues and the solutions, such as border security, such as curbing, public assistance for people who shouldn't be receiving it, looking at different ways of streamlining our work permit process and our student visa process, you'll probably find that 70% of the American people agree on these reforms.
do you believe in legal amnesty for existing residents who haven't had legal problems?
I believe in bringing everybody into compliance with our nation's laws. And so what that means is that you may need for work permits, for people who have stayed here beyond their permit, to come up with some sort of fine and fee schedule if they would like to remain. For individuals that we perhaps do not want to remain in this country, for those that have a criminal record, we need to have targeted enforcement there to deal with the criminal aspect. And I talk to Latinos who say, look, if someone has a criminal background, we don't want them here as much as you don't want them here. So can we deal with that segment of the 11 million? And so I don't believe that you can say amnesty across the board because I don't think that's a proper solution. I do think bringing people into legal compliance with our laws should be the ultimate standard. Yes, sir.
I asked this question to Scott Peters last month. It seems that water is becoming at least, but maybe not currently, but it's getting there, as valuable a commodity as oil. We have all kinds
Or
of...
coffee, according to the latest news.
Yeah, right. We have all kinds of debates about pipelines for oil, and we continue to have the situation where, like, the Northeast and Midwest get tremendous amounts of water and we're in a drought. I had suggested to Scott Peters that maybe some of the infrastructure should stop concentrating on oil pipelines, start concentrating on water pipelines and ways of moving the water in this country from the parts of the country that are getting saturated to the parts of the country that are in drought. He didn't think it was a great idea to start building infrastructure. He came up with 5 or 6 other ideas. What do you think about dealing with climate change and moving water around from places where it's too plentiful to places where it's not plentiful enough?
I think we need to take an all of the above approach to our dealing with energy and water. If you take just one strategy and say, well, we're going to put everything there, again, that's not the way the private sector deals with problems. We ought to be looking at multiple avenues to achieving water independence, energy independence. In this country, we are very close to achieving energy independence. It's amazing. And I think making sure that we keep dollars out of the hands of extremist groups in the Middle East, having a policy of energy independence in this country is a pretty important policy for a number of reasons. My hope is that we can expand the renewable energy portion of that portfolio, but we need to be looking across the board at all sorts of solutions there. In the area of water, conservation is our best strategy, and we should start with that. Do you know that San Diego is using less water today, even though we have a larger population, than in 1990? Through conservation. By building more water and energy efficient housing units, we're becoming a lot smarter and a lot more sustainable. I believe that if technology can revolutionize your life in terms of how you pay your bills and how you find out the weather and how you transact and communicate with your friends and family, that technology can transform how we're managing our consumption and reduce our footprint in both energy and water. I think conservation needs to be the first stage of any sort of water or energy policy. We also have to be looking at supply. In the area of supply and storage, we do need infrastructure investment for both pipeline as well as water reservoirs. Now, Scott Peters on the City Council doubled our water rates. Doubled. And a lot of that money went out down the drain, if you will, through bonus programs, tens of millions of dollars a year in bonuses for water department employees. Now, I kept criticizing this program, and Scott kept approving these bonuses. When I got in there, I said, can we have a performance audit of these bonuses? Because San Diego ratepayers have a right to know whether their money's going to the right spot. The auditor came back and issued a scathing report. The auditor said, I cannot find any justification for the bonuses. They are not substantiated. And he found out a staggering number. 95% of all the water department employees, and by the way, we have more water and wastewater employees than we have police officers in the city of San Diego. 95% got the bonus every year. Now, it led me to ask the question, I wonder what the 5% were doing. I mean, how bad do you have to be to avoid those bonuses at the water department? And we're not talking about small bonuses. We're talking about several $1000s per employee. Tens of millions of dollars annually. And he rubber stamped approved it every year, even though everybody was laughing about the program behind the backs of the taxpayer. I was able to eliminate that program once the audit came out, a unanimous vote. And by the way, all the council members changed their position on that issue when my audit came out. And so what does that mean? We have extra money now to put into infrastructure. So there's a lot of people saying, well, we don't have enough money for infrastructure, so we should just buy water at higher prices. That doesn't seem to make sense. Let's invest in core infrastructure and reservoirs so that when we do have a surplus supply, that we don't let it flow out to the sea. Every day we dump hundreds of thousands of gallons of fresh water into the ocean. San Diego. Fresh water. And so there are ways for us to look at reservoir augmentation as well as storage. Desalination is another one. Desalination has been fought for decades by certain groups. But we have the Carlsbad plant coming online. Probably in the next 2 years, they already have begun construction. But again, my approach is not one silver bullet. It's let's look at all ways to expand both supply and reduce consumption. A lot can be done by reducing consumption. One last question. It's 8 o'clock because I got to roll. Yes?
Are you in favor of Governor Brown's proposed transformation of water from north to south? It's about a $25 billion proposal, piping the water down. Are you in favor of that?
I don't think it's a cost-effective way to deal with the problem. I think those billions of dollars can be more thoughtfully spent on a number of more common sense ideas about local storage, gray water, recycling here in San Diego is something where we can invest in. I'd also like us to look at ways to reduce water pollution, which will help us with our wastewater compliance issues. Whenever it rains in this town, which isn't very often, we have a major environmental impact that occurs. Because all that oil on the roads, all that trash that builds up, flows out into the beaches and the bays. And it just is absolutely contaminating our waterways when that happens. There are ways for us to thoughtfully deal with stormwater runoff in San Diego in a far more efficient way. So he's talking about $25 billion. My response is, okay, you put $25 billion on the table, let's look at every dollar to make sure it's having the biggest bang for the buck. All sides have criticized the governor's plan as being about throwing money at the problem rather than thoughtfully investing in different ways to deal with water pollution runoff, as well as capacity, conservation, and supply. I've studied water for a long time because as mayor, I was saying, yes, pension was a big crisis, but our environment and the water challenge in San Diego was going to be the biggest issue I was going to deal with while in office, in terms of challenge. And I'm telling you, Ken is exactly right. Len is exactly right. This is a huge issue, and politicians need to do more than just talk about 25 billion here or there. They've got to come up with some sensible solutions in these areas. I want to end on this. I know some of you are Democrats. I know some of you probably have voted a straight ticket all your life. I was amazed in the mayor's race, however, driving through La Jolla, driving through Claremont, how many Obama DeMaio signs I saw. And that's because in the mayor's race, people saw Bob Filner, of the people who paid attention, and said, there's something wrong here. There's something really wrong. Now, notice I said of people paying attention. I have data to back that up. We did a tracking poll every single day during the mayor's race. In a Democrat city, I was winning Republicans, I was winning independents, and I was winning citywide. 1 out of 5 Democrats. In this district, the 52nd, I won 1 out of 4 Democrats in the mayor's race. And I'm proud of that fact because I had so many people come up and say, Carl, you're the first Republican I have ever voted for. And they usually follow that up with by saying, please don't burn me. Please don't change. Please don't let me down. And I earned that support. In the poll, we were leading 5 points out for 45, 60 days. Saturday before the election, 72 hours before the election, I was up 5.2%. Up 5.2. And then Sunday, the numbers started shifting as a whole group of voters that were low information and rarely voted in elections said, well, we decided we're going to vote. Why? Because, well, Obama needs us and we're going to turn out to vote. On election day, we lost by a point. That last poll asked a question. Have you heard anything about Carl DeMaio, Bob Filner, or the San Diego mayor's race in the last couple weeks? Of the 80% of voters who had heard something about one of those 3 terms, we won 54-46. You know what happened with the last 20% who had, again, after a $21 million mayor's race, they hadn't heard anything about these 3 terms. We lost 68-32. Overwhelmingly lost. And that was the margin of the loss in the election. Now, obviously, we can turn and say shame on certain folks who covered up for Bob. And they did. They covered up. But a lot of people who kind of sensed what was going on, that he wasn't quite right, and they didn't like his ideas on policy, he didn't seem to have ideas, they went ahead and they crossed over party lines. I appreciated that. My hope is that you will, both sides, Republicans and Democrats, will not offer blind loyalty to a party, but instead will say, this old system doesn't seem to work, maybe we should try something new. I promise you, we may not agree on everything, but I will work as hard as I can to stay faithful to a problem solver approach that is not tied to party label, but is tied to doing the right thing. I did that in San Diego. I asked for your help to do it in Washington. Thank you.